Human youth loses his chance at dream job to fix alien ship, but the alien was the boss. Kyle Mercer sprinted through the crowded streets of Nexus Prime, the gleaming alien megacity that had become humanity's gateway to the stars. His heart pounded against his ribs as he dodged between towering blue-skinned Etherians and the bulky, four-armed Dornax merchants that dominated the commercial district. "Excuse me, coming through," he called, narrowly avoiding collision with a hovering food cart. Today was the day. His interview at Astrolux Industries, the most prestigious corporation in the quadrant. At 19, he was young for such an opportunity, but his reputation as a mechanical prodigy had earned him this shot. His gray uniform with its subtle gold trim, purchased with 3 months of savings, felt crisp against his skin, the fabric designed to impress Etherian sensibilities. Kyle checked his wrist display. 22 minutes until the interview. He was cutting it close, but if he maintained this pace, he'd make it with 5 minutes to spare. Just enough time to compose himself before meeting the hiring committee. He turned down Celestial Avenue, a shortcut that would save precious minutes. The buildings here rose like silver fingers toward the violet sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of Nexus Prime's artificial sun. As he rounded a corner, something caught his eye. A personal flyer hovering erratically about 10 feet above the pedestrian walkway. The sleek vehicle's propulsion system was sputtering, blue energy flaring inconsistently from its stabilizers. Inside, a tall Etherian male was frantically working the controls. His elegant features tightened with frustration. The alien's dark cloak with golden accents fluttered as the flyer jerked violently to one side, nearly colliding with a building. Cal hesitated, glancing at his wrist display again. 20 minutes. "Damn it," he muttered, already knowing what he was going to do. He approached the struggling flyer. "Hey, need some help down there?" The Etherian looked, his silver eyes narrowing. "Unless you're a certified astral-class mechanic, I doubt you can assist." "Well, I'm not certified yet," Cal called back, with a confident grin. "But I can tell from here your quantum stabilizer is out of alignment with your gravity dampener. Classic issue with the X7 models." The alien's expression shifted from dismissal to surprise. "You know Etherian technology?" "I know machines," Cal replied, already shrugging off his formal jacket. "Can you lower it about 5 feet? I need access to the maintenance panel." The Etherian complied, and Cal climbed onto a nearby bench. With practiced movements, he popped open the access panel beneath the flyer and began rerouting power connections. The alien watched with undisguised interest as Kyle's fingers moved with precision through the complex alien circuitry. "The problem is this connection here," Kale explained, pointing to a glowing blue node. "Your energy flow is backing up because the regulator is shot. I can bypass it temporarily, but you'll need a proper replacement." "Impressive knowledge for a human," the Etherian remarked, his tone warmer now. Kel smiled, focused on his work. "My dad worked salvage on decommissioned Etherian vessels. I grew up taking this stuff apart." Time slipped away as Kel lost himself in the repair. The elegant complexity of Etherian technology had always fascinated him. The way it blended mathematical precision with an almost artistic flow of energy. It was like music made physical, and he was conducting a symphony of circuits and power. "That should do it," he finally announced, closing the panel and wiping his hands on a cloth from his pocket. "Try the ignition sequence now." The flyer hummed to life, its propulsion system glowing with steady blue light. The Etherian nodded approvingly and landed the vehicle on the walkway. "You have my gratitude, young man," he said, stepping out of the flyer with fluid grace. Up close, Cal could see the delicate white lines that marked the alien's face and neck, symbols of high status among Etherians. "Happy to help," Carl replied, suddenly remembering his interview. He glanced at his display and felt his stomach drop. "Holy, I'm late!" The interview had started 5 minutes ago. Even if he ran, he'd never make it in time. "Late for what?" the Etherian inquired. "My interview at Astrolux Industries," Kale said, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. "It was my one shot at getting my foot in the door." The Etherian studied him for a long moment, those silver eyes seeming to look straight through him. "What position were you applying for?" "Junior engineer in the R&D department," Kyle answered, already mentally calculating how long it would take to secure another interview opportunity. Months at least. I see, the alien said, a slight smile forming on his thin lips. What is your name? Kyle Mercer, sir. Well, Kyle Mercer, I am Thalen Vox. The Etherean extended a long-fingered hand. Kale shook it automatically, then froze as recognition dawned. Thalen Vox, as in the owner of Astrolux Industries. The alien's smile widened. The very same, and I believe I may have a position for someone with your particular talents. Kale arrived at Astrolux Industries headquarters precisely 30 minutes early for his first day. The towering structure of gleaming metal and luminous glass dominated the skyline of Nexus Prime's business district, its spire reaching toward the stars like a beacon. Just breathe, he muttered to himself, adjusting his new technician's uniform. The dark blue jumpsuit with the Astrolux logo, a stylized galaxy and silver thread, felt strange after years of wearing whatever was comfortable for tinkering with machines. The security checkpoint was manned by a burly Dornax whose forearms efficiently processed the line of employees. When Kale's turn came, the alien's yellow eyes narrowed. Human! Rare to see your kind in this sector, the guard rumbled, scanning Kale's newly issued ID chip. First day, Kale replied with a smile that wasn't returned. Level 42, Engineering Base C. Don't wander. The Dornax waved him through with two of his massive hands while the other pair was already processing the next employee. The elevator was packed with various alien species, most giving Cal curious or dismissive glances. Humans were still relatively uncommon in the upper echelons of alien corporations, despite the interspecies alliance being nearly 3 decades old. When the doors opened at level 42, Kyle stepped into organized chaos. The engineering bay was a vast open space filled with workstations, testing chambers, and prototype vehicles in various stages of completion. Etherean technicians moved with practiced precision, their tall frames gliding between projects with an almost balletic grace. You must be Mercer, a gruff voice said behind him. Kyle turned to find a stocky Valerian with rust-colored scales and intelligent eyes. I'm Drav, your supervisor. Thalen Vox himself added you to my team. Care to explain that? Kyle swallowed. I fixed his flyer when it malfunctioned. Drav's scaled brow ridge rose. And that got you a position at Astrolux? Must have been some repair job. He gestured for Kale to follow. You'll be starting with basic maintenance on our fleet of corporate shuttles. Nothing fancy, but it'll let me assess your skill level. As they walked through the bay, Kyle noticed a commotion near one of the larger testing chambers. A group of Etherean engineers were gathered around a sleek prototype vehicle, their attention focused on a female figure at the center. Even from a distance, she was striking. Her light blue skin seemed to shimmer under the bay's bright lights, and her silver-white hair was swept up in an intricate style that accentuated her long neck and delicate features. Unlike the practical attire of the engineers, she wore a form-fitting dress with geometric patterns that shifted colors with her movements. Who's that? Kyle asked before he could stop himself. Drav followed his gaze and snorted. That rookie is Layla Vox, the boss's daughter and our head of research and development. Brilliant mind, but he lowered his voice. Has a particular dislike for humans. I'd steer clear if I were you. As if sensing their attention, Layla looked up. Her eyes, a piercing silver like her father's, locked onto Kyle. Her expression shifted from neutral to cold disdain in an instant. Too late, Drav muttered. She's coming over. Try not to say anything stupid. Layla approached with fluid grace, the engineers parting before her like water around a stone. Up close, Kale could see the delicate white lines on her face, similar to her father's but more intricate, forming patterns that highlighted her high cheekbones and full lips. Drav, she acknowledged the Valerian with a nod before turning her attention to Kale. So this is my father's charity project. Kale straightened his shoulders. Kale Mercer, ma'am. New technician. I'm aware, she replied, her voice cool and melodic. My father seems to think you possess unusual talent for human. I remain unconvinced. I guess I'll have to prove myself then, Kale responded with a smile that didn't waver under her scrutiny. Something flickered in her silver eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at his confidence. Indeed you will. The prototype you'll be working on is critical to our next generation propulsion system. Any mistakes could set us back months. No pressure then, Kale said lightly. The corner of Layla's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. Drav, ensure he's properly trained before allowing him near anything important. She turned to leave, then paused. And Mercer, my father may be impressed by your primitive intuition, but I expect precision and excellence in my department. As she walked away, Drav let out a low whistle. Well, that went better than expected. She usually doesn't bother with introductions for new technicians, especially human ones. Cal watched her retreating figure, intrigued despite himself. What's her issue with humans? Trade dispute gone bad a few years back. A human corporation tried to steal Etherian technology, left a bad taste. Drav clapped a scaled hand on Cal's shoulder. Don't take it personally. Prove your worth, and she'll come around. Maybe. Kyle nodded, already formulating a plan. If Layla Vox wanted precision and excellence, that's exactly what she would get. He hadn't come this far to be dismissed because of his species. Show me what I'm working on, he said to Drav, a determined glint in his eye. I'm ready to start. After 2 weeks at Astrolux, Kale had settled into a routine. He arrived early, stayed late, and absorbed everything he could about Etherian technology. The other technicians had gradually warmed to him, impressed by his quick learning and willingness to tackle the most tedious tasks without complaint. Today he was alone in Testing Bay 7, running diagnostics on the prototype propulsion system that Layla's team had been developing. The sleek, teardrop-shaped engine core pulsed with ethereal blue light as Kale examined the readouts on his datapad. That can't be right, he muttered, frowning at the energy fluctuation patterns. He ran the test again, receiving the same results. The harmonic resonance was off by a fraction, but in space travel, fractions meant the difference between a successful journey and molecular disintegration. He was so absorbed in the data that he didn't notice Layla entering the bay until her voice cut through his concentration. What are you doing with my prototype, Mercer? Her tone was sharp, but not as openly hostile as during their first meeting. Kyle looked up, momentarily startled by her presence. Today, her silver-white hair fell in a cascade down one shoulder, contrasting with the deep blue of her fitted research uniform. Running the standard diagnostics, he replied, then hesitated. But I found something concerning. Layla's eyes narrowed. Concerning how? The harmonic resonance is destabilizing at high energy outputs. See this pattern? He held out the datapad. It's subtle, but it could cause catastrophic failure if the engine reaches full power. She took the pad, her slender fingers brushing against his. For a brief moment, Cal felt a strange electric sensation at the contact. Layla seemed to notice it too, her silver eyes flicking to his face before returning to the data. This is within acceptable parameters, she said dismissively, though Cal noticed her studying the readouts more carefully than her tone suggested. For conventional engines, yes, Cal agreed, but your design pushes the boundaries of what's possible. The standard tolerances don't apply. Layla's expression tightened. And a human technician would know better than Etherian engineers who have studied propulsion theory for decades? I'm not claiming superior knowledge, Kyle said calmly. Just a different perspective. Sometimes an outsider sees what experts miss because they're too close to the problem. She stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Finally, she said, "Show me." Kel walked her through his findings, explaining the subtle pattern he'd noticed in the energy fluctuations. As he spoke, her initial skepticism gradually shifted to focused attention. If we recalibrate the containment field to account for these micro-fluctuations, he suggested, pulling up the engine schematics, we could prevent the cascade failure before it starts. That would require redesigning the entire stabilization matrix, Layla pointed out, but her tone had lost its edge. Not necessarily. Kale's fingers flew across the display, making adjustments to the design. If we add a secondary harmonic buffer here, it would compensate without compromising your original design. Layla leaned closer to examine his modifications, her shoulder nearly touching his. Cal was suddenly aware of a subtle, intoxicating scent, something like exotic flowers with an electric undertone that must be uniquely Etherian. This is actually quite elegant, she admitted, sounding surprised. Simple, but effective. Sometimes the best solutions are, Cal said with a smile. Their eyes met, And for a fleeting moment, something shifted in Layla's gaze, a softening perhaps, or a reassessment. The moment was shattered by an alarm blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began pulsing, and a computerized voice announced, "Security breach detected. All personnel report to designated safe zones." "What's happening?" Kyle asked as technicians began rushing from the bay. Layla was already moving toward a security terminal. "Someone's accessing restricted files in the main database," she said, her fingers flying over the controls. Her eyes widened. "From your terminal, Mercer." "What? That's impossible," Kyle protested. "I've been here the whole time." "The system doesn't lie," she said, her earlier warmth vanishing. "Security is on their way." As if on cue, 4 Dornax security officers burst into the bay, weapons drawn. "Human technician Kyle Mercer," the lead officer announced, "you are detained pending investigation for corporate espionage." "This is ridiculous," Kyle said, raising his hand slowly. "I haven't accessed any restricted files." "Your credentials were used to breach our most sensitive research database," the security chief growled. "The penalty for industrial espionage is severe, human." As they approached to restrain him, Layla stepped between them. "Wait," she commanded. "Something isn't right. He's been in this bay for the past 3 hours. I've been watching him on the monitors." The security chief hesitated. "Ms. Vox, and the evidence?" "Could be fabricated," she interrupted. "Someone could have cloned his access chip." She turned to Kyle, her expression calculating. "Or perhaps this is exactly what it looks like, and he's been sent to infiltrate Astrolux." Kyle met her gaze steadily. "I'm not a spy. Someone's setting me up." For a tense moment, Layla studied him, as if trying to read the truth in his eyes. Then she made a decision. "Secure him in my private lab, not the detention center," she ordered the guards. "I want to investigate this personally before we involve the authorities." As the guards led him away, Kale caught a final glimpse of Layla. Despite her outward composure, something in her expression had changed. A flicker of doubt about his guilt, perhaps, or something more complex that he couldn't quite decipher. Layla's private lab was a stark contrast to the bustling engineering bay. Sleek and minimalist, with holographic displays floating in the air, and equipment Kyle had never seen before, it reflected its owner's precise nature. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to a chair while she secured the door. The 2 Dornax guards remained outside, their massive shadows visible through the frosted glass. Kale complied, watching as Layla activated a privacy field. The air shimmered around them, and the ambient noise of the facility faded to silence. "They can't hear us now," she said, leaning against her desk. Tell me the truth, Mercer. Are you working for someone else?" "No," he replied firmly. "I came to Nexus Prime for one reason, to work for Astrolux. Someone's setting me up." Layla studied him, her silver eyes unblinking. "The timing is suspicious. You arrive, gain access to our most sensitive projects, and suddenly our security is compromised. If I were a spy, would I have shown you the flaw in your engine design? I could have let it fail catastrophically and damaged Astrolux's reputation." A small crease appeared between her brows. A valid point. She moved to a terminal and began typing rapidly. "The breach originated from your terminal, but the access patterns are unusual, too efficient, too direct, like someone who already knew exactly what they were looking for." "Can you trace it?" Kyle asked, moving to stand beside her. "Don't push your luck, human," she warned, but without real heat. "I'm not convinced of your innocence yet." As she worked, Cal noticed a small device on her desk, a personal shield generator, but with modifications he didn't recognize. "Expecting trouble?" he asked, nodding toward it. Layla's fingers paused. "My father insisted. There have been threats. Nothing concrete, just whispers that someone wants to acquire our new propulsion technology by any means necessary." "And you think that's related to what's happening now?" "Possibly," she returned to her analysis. "The data theft targeted the propulsion research specifically. Your credentials were..." She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. "Wait, this code signature? I've seen it before." Before she could elaborate, the lights in the lab flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The emergency backup illuminated seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's not supposed to happen, Layla said, her voice tense. The lab has independent power. A deafening explosion rocked the room, throwing both of them to the floor. Kale instinctively covered Layla with his body as debris rained down from the ceiling. The privacy field collapsed, and acrid smoke began filling the lab. "Are you hurt?" he asked, looking down at her. Their faces were inches apart, her silver eyes wide with shock. "No," she breathed, "but we need to move." That was a targeted strike. As they scrambled to their feet, the door to the lab burst open. Instead of the Dornax guards, 3 figures in environmental suits rushed in, weapons raised. "Layla Vox," one of them announced in a mechanically filtered voice. "You will provide access to Project Starfire or die where you stand." Kale didn't hesitate. He grabbed the shield generator from the desk, activated it, and threw himself in front of Layla just as the intruder fired. The energy blast hit the shield, which absorbed most of the impact but still sent Kale staggering backward into Layla. "The ventilation shaft," she whispered urgently in his ear, "behind the storage unit." While the attackers regrouped for another assault, Kale kept the shield raised with one hand and used the other to help Layla slide the heavy storage unit aside, revealing a narrow opening. She slipped in first, with Kale following just as another blast hit the shield, overloading its circuits in a shower of sparks. The shaft was tight, forcing them to crawl rapidly through the darkness. Behind them, angry shouts and the sound of equipment being smashed echoed through the metal tunnel. "Who are they?" Kyle gasped as they emerged into a maintenance corridor 2 levels down. "Proxians," Layla replied, her voice cold with fury. "A rival corporation that's been trying to steal our technology for years." She led him through a maze of service corridors until they reached a small, unmarked door. It opened to reveal a panic room equipped with communications equipment and security monitors. "We should be safe here temporarily," she said, sealing the door behind them. "This room isn't on any official blueprints." As the adrenaline began to fade, Kale became acutely aware of their proximity in the confined space. Layla's normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her silver-white hair partially fallen from its updo, a smudge of soot on one cheek, her research uniform torn at the shoulder. Somehow she looked even more captivating. "You saved my life," she said quietly, her silver eyes searching his face. "You could have used the distraction to escape, to clear your name. Instead, you put yourself between me and a weapon." "Instinct," Cal replied with a small shrug. "Humans are funny that way." "Is that what you call it?" A hint of a smile played at her lips. "My people would call it irrational. Fascinating, but irrational." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her blue skin. "I've studied humans, you know? Your history, your physiologies, your passions." The last word hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. "And what have you learned?" Kale asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "That you're driven by impulses we Etherians often suppress. That you follow your hearts as much as your minds." Her hand rose to his chest, resting over his rapidly beating heart. "That in moments of danger, your true nature reveals itself." The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Kale wasn't sure who moved first, perhaps they both did. But suddenly her lips were on his, cool and soft, and surprisingly eager. Her arms wound around his neck as it encircled her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, transcending species and cultural differences, fueled by the lingering fear of death and the intoxicating relief of survival. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "This is highly inappropriate," Layla whispered against his lips, even as her fingers tangled in his hair. "Completely," Kale agreed, trailing kisses along the delicate white lines of her neck. "We should stop." "Absolutely," she murmured, making no move to pull away. "After we deal with the immediate threat." A smile curved his lips against her skin. "Of course, the immediate threat first." But as her hands began exploring the contours of his body with scientific curiosity and unmistakable desire, the Proxian attackers seemed very far away indeed. A sharp beeping from the security console interrupted their embrace. Layla reluctantly pulled away from Kyle, her normally composed demeanor flushed with a silvery sheen that he realized must be the Etherian equivalent of blushing. "The monitors," she said, her voice husky as she moved to the console. Kale followed, his mind still reeling from what had just transpired between them. The security feeds showed multiple angles of the facility, most displaying chaos. Employees being herded into the central atrium by armed proxians in environmental suits. "They've taken hostages," Kale said, leaning over Layla's shoulder. His proximity sent another wave of that electric sensation between them, but they both forced their focus to the crisis at hand. "There's Drav." Layla pointed to the Valerian supervisor, who was bleeding from a head wound but still standing defiantly as he shepherded younger technicians behind him. "They've gathered everyone from Engineering Base C." Cal counted at least 15 hostages and 6 Proxian attackers. "What do they want?" "Project Starfire, our new propulsion system." Layla's fingers danced across the console, bringing up different camera angles. "The prototype is nearly complete. With it, they could dominate the interstellar shipping lanes. And they're using your people as leverage to get it," Cal concluded grimly. Layla nodded, her earlier warmth replaced by cold fury. "Proxians have no honor. They couldn't compete with Etherian innovation, so they resort to theft and violence." Cal studied the layout of the facility on the monitors. "We need to get those people out safely." "We?" Layla arched an elegant eyebrow. "You're still technically a suspect, Mercer, and this isn't your fight." "It became my fight when they tried to kill you," he replied simply. "Besides, I think we've established I'm not working for the Proxians." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I suppose we have." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the intensity of their earlier connection flared between them. Layla was the first to look away, but her hand briefly squeezed his. "So what's your plan?" she asked. "They're expecting Etherian tactics, calculated, precise, by the book." Kale grinned. "Let's give them human unpredictability instead." For the next few minutes, they formulated a strategy, combining Cal's unconventional thinking with Layla's intimate knowledge of the facility. The plan was risky, but as Cal pointed out, sometimes the best solution is the one no one sees coming. "Like stopping to help a stranded alien when you're late for a job interview?" Layla asked with unexpected playfulness. "Exactly like that," Cal replied, surprised by her reference to how they'd met. "Though that worked out pretty well for me in the end." "Did it?" Her silver eyes held his, filled with meaning beyond the immediate danger. "I'd say so." His voice softened, "though I'm still evaluating all the benefits." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities, before Layla broke it with a businesslike nod. "We should prepare. There are emergency supplies in that cabinet. Weapons, communication devices." As they gathered what they needed, Cal couldn't help but notice how their movements had become synchronized, anticipating each other's needs without words. It was as if their brief but intense connection had forged something deeper than physical attraction. A partnership of complementary strengths. "I've never worked with a human before," Layla admitted as she handed him a compact energy pistol. "My father always spoke highly of your species' adaptability, but I dismissed it as sentimentality." "And now?" Kyle asked, and checking the weapon's charge. "Now I'm beginning to understand why he values humans." Her gaze traveled over him with new appreciation. "You're unpredictable in fascinating ways." "Is that a compliment?" "An observation," she replied, but her tone was warm. "Etherians value control, precision. We plan for every contingency. And humans? You improvise. You follow instincts we've evolved to suppress." She stepped closer, lowering her voice though they were alone. "You feel without restraint." The air between them thickened with unspoken desire. Kyle reached out, tracing one of the white lines that curved along her cheekbone. "Is that so terrible?" "It should be," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "But I'm finding it intoxicating." Their lips met again, this time with deliberate slowness, exploring and savoring. Layla's hand slid beneath his uniform top, her cool fingers tracing patterns across his warm skin that left trails of tingling sensation. "Your temperature," she murmured against his mouth, "so much higher than mine." "Complementary differences," he replied, his hands finding the delicate curve of her waist, "like our approach to problem solving." She laughed softly, the sound musical and unexpected. "Is that what we're calling this?" "Among other things," Kyle said, pulling her closer until their bodies pressed together, her coolness a perfect counterpoint to his heat. For a few precious minutes, they lost themselves in discovery, mapping the unfamiliar terrain of each other's bodies with curious hands and eager lips. The danger waiting outside their sanctuary only heightened every sensation, making each touch more vivid, each kiss more urgent. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, Lila's normally perfect composure was completely undone. Her hair tumbling loose around her shoulders, her lips darkened to a deep violet from their kisses. "We should go," she said reluctantly, though her hands still rested on his chest. "The longer we wait, the more danger the hostages are in." Kyle nodded, equally reluctant to break their connection. "Ready when you are." As they made final preparations to leave their shelter and confront the Proxians, Kel realized something fundamental had shifted between them. What had begun as cultural curiosity had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a bond that transcended their differences, combining the best of both their worlds. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Human adaptability and Etherian precision, a formidable combination that the Proxians would never see coming. They moved through the maintenance tunnels with practiced stealth, Layla leading with precise knowledge of every turn, Kale following with alert adaptability. Their plan was elegantly simple. Cal would create a diversion by triggering a controlled energy fluctuation in the prototype engine, while Lila would use her override codes to activate the facility's security protocols remotely. "The fluctuation won't damage the engine permanently," Kyle assured her as they paused at a junction. "Just enough to draw their attention and trigger the containment alarms. And while they're distracted, we lock down sections of the facility to isolate them from each other," Layla added, checking her communicator. "Divide and conquer." They reached a maintenance hatch that would give them access to the level above Engineering Base C. Layla entered her access code, but the panel flashed red. "That's not right," she frowned, trying again. "My codes should work on any system in the facility." Kale examined the panel. "Someone's changed the security protocols. But who would have that kind of access besides you and your father?" A cold realization dawned on Layla's face. "Naren Voss, my father's chief security officer. He has emergency override capabilities." Her voice hardened. "And he's been acting strangely the past few weeks, ever since we finalized the propulsion design." "You think he's working with the Proxians?" "It would explain how they breached our security so easily." Layla's silver eyes flashed with anger. "And how they knew to frame you? A newcomer, a human, the perfect scapegoat." Cal felt a surge of determination. "Well, let's disappoint him, shall we?" He pulled a small tool from his pocket and began working on the panel. Within moments, he had bypassed the electronic lock, and the hatch slid open. "Impressive," Layla remarked. "Where did you learn that?" "Misspent youth," Kale grinned. "Not all human skills come from formal education." They climbed through the hatch and found themselves in a narrow maintenance corridor above the engineering bay. Through grated flooring, they could see the hostages gathered below, surrounded by Proxian guards. Drav was still protecting the younger technicians, despite his injury looking worse than before. "There," Layla whispered, pointing to a tall Etherian in a security uniform speaking with the Proxian leader. "That's Naren." Kyle watched as the security chief gestured toward a sealed door at the far end of the bay. "He's showing them where the prototype is kept." "We need to move faster," Layla said urgently. "If they get that engine off-world, they'll reverse engineer it within weeks." They continued along the corridor until they reached the control junction for the bay's environmental systems. Kyle quickly began rerouting power connections while Layla kept watch. "This should trigger the containment protocol," he explained, working rapidly. "But without your access codes, I can't control which sections lock down. It's going to be messier than we planned." "Okay, humans and their improvisations," Layla said, but her tone was admiring rather than critical. "Ready when you are." Cal made the final connection, and immediately alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red warning lights flashed as the automated system announced, "Energy containment breach detected. Emergency protocols engaged." Below them, chaos erupted. The Proxians and Naren looked around in confusion as emergency barriers began descending randomly throughout the bay, separating groups of hostages from their captors. "Now's our chance," Cal said, moving toward a maintenance ladder. "We need to get to the hostages while they're distracted." They descended quickly, emerging behind a large piece of equipment just as Naren shouted at the Proxian leader. "This is impossible! The engine is powered down. There can't be a containment breach." "You said this facility was secure!" The Proxian snarled, his filtered voice crackling with anger. "Fix this now, or our agreement is void." Lila caught Kale's eye and nodded toward a group of technicians who had been separated from their guards by a containment barrier. They were only a few meters away, with just one distracted Proxian between them. Kyle understood immediately. He picked up a piece of metal debris and threw it across the room, creating a loud clang. When the guard turned toward the noise, Layla moved with astonishing speed, incapacitating him with a precise strike to a nerve cluster at the base of his neck. "Etherian martial arts?" she explained at Kel's surprised expression. "Not all our skills are intellectual." They quickly ushered the freed technicians toward a service exit, but before they could move to the next group, Naren spotted them. "Layla," he called out, his voice carrying over the alarms. "I should have known you'd survive. Always your father's daughter, too stubborn to die." "And you're too greedy to be loyal," she replied coldly. "How much did they pay you, Naren?" "What was the price of your honor?" The security chief laughed. "Honor doesn't build empires, Layla. Your father is too cautious, too ethical. The Proxians understand ambition." While they exchanged words, Kel noticed the Proxian leader quietly moving toward the prototype chamber, using the confrontation as cover. Without hesitation, he slipped away from Layla's side, circling behind equipment to intercept the alien. Naren continued, unaware of Kel's movement. "The future belongs to those willing to take what they want. Your father never understood that." "And you think these Proxians will share their spoils with you?" Layla kept him talking, subtly positioning herself to protect the remaining hostages. "You're a tool to them, nothing more." Meanwhile, Kale reached the prototype chamber just as the Proxian leader was overriding the lock. He tackled the alien from behind, sending them both crashing into the door. They grappled fiercely, the Proxian's environmental suit giving him additional bulk, but limiting his mobility. "Human vermin," the alien hissed, landing a blow to Kyle's ribs that sent pain shooting through his side. Kyle responded with a quick jab to the breathing apparatus on the Proxian's helmet, cracking the filter. As the alien frantically tried to repair it, Cal delivered a decisive strike that rendered him unconscious. Across the bay, the confrontation between Layla and Naren had escalated. The security chief had drawn a weapon, backing her against a containment barrier with nowhere to retreat. "I always admired your intelligence, Layla," Naren said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "But not your judgment, especially your recent human interests." Before he could fire, a voice rang out from the facility's communication system. "This is Thalen Vox. All security personnel converge on Engineering Base C immediately. Traitor identified, Naren Voss." The momentary distraction was all Layla needed. She ducked under Naren's aim and swept his legs from under him, sending his shot wide as he fell. In the ensuing confusion, Astrolux security forces flooded the bay, quickly subduing the remaining Proxians. Kale rushed to Layla's side as she secured Naren with restraints. "Your father has excellent timing," he remarked, wincing slightly from his injured ribs. "He always does," she replied, her eyes softening as she noticed his pain. "You're hurt." "Worth it," Kyle said, glancing around at the freed hostages. "We did it." Layla's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "We did." "Your human unpredictability and my Etherian precision, it seems we make quite the team." The look they exchanged held promises that transcended the chaos around them. A connection forged in crisis, but built on something far more profound than mere survival. 3 weeks after the Proxian attack, Astrolux Industries had largely returned to normal operations. The damaged sections of the facility had been repaired, security protocols completely overhauled, and Naren Voss was awaiting trial for his betrayal. The prototype engine, safely secured and improved with Kyle's modifications, was now ready for its first full-scale test. Kyle stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows in Thelen Vox's executive office, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape of Nexus Prime. The afternoon light caught on the spires of distant buildings, turning them into glittering beacons against the violet sky. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Thalen's voice came from behind him. The Etherean executive entered with his characteristic fluid grace, his dark cloak replaced today with formal attire that emphasized his status. "Sir?" Kyle turned, still not entirely comfortable in the presence of the company's owner despite everything that had happened. "Please, sit." Thalen gestured to the seating area, an arrangement of elegantly curved furniture that somehow managed to accommodate both Etherean and human physiology comfortably. "I've been reviewing the security footage from the incident. Remarkable work." "Thank you, sir, but I couldn't have done it without Layla." A knowing smile touched Thalen's lips. "Yes, my daughter has mentioned your collaboration quite extensively." Kel felt heat rise to his face, wondering exactly how much Layla had shared with her father about their relationship, which had deepened considerably in the aftermath of the crisis. The night after the attack, she had come to his quarters, and what began as a discussion about the events had evolved into something far more intimate, a passionate exploration of their differences and similarities that had left them both changed in fundamental ways. "I've called you here for a reason, Kyle," Thalen continued, mercifully changing the subject. "Astrolux needs to adapt. The Proxian attack exposed vulnerabilities in our approach, not just in security, but in thinking. We've become too predictable, too rigid in our methods." "That's the advantage of being an outsider sometimes," Kale offered. "Fresh perspective." "Precisely," Thalen leaned forward. "Which is why I'm creating a new division, Innovation Security. Its purpose will be to anticipate threats through unconventional thinking and develop countermeasures that no one would expect. I want you to lead it." Kyle blinked in surprise. "Yeah? But I've only been with the company for a few weeks, and in that time you've saved our most valuable prototype, rescued our personnel, and exposed a traitor." Thalen's silver eyes, so like his daughter's, held Kyle's gaze. "More importantly, you've demonstrated the very quality we need, human adaptability combined with technical expertise." "I'm honored, sir, but the division would work closely with research and development," Thalen added with a slight smile. "Layla's department." Before Kale could respond, the office door opened and Layla herself entered. She wore a formal research uniform today, but had styled her silver white hair in a looser fashion than her usual severe updo, with sections falling freely around her face in a way that softened her features. "Father, She stopped when she saw Kale, her professional demeanor momentarily slipping as a smile touched her lips. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Perfect timing," Thalen said. "I was just offering Kale the position we discussed." Layla moved to stand beside her father, but her eyes remained on Kale. And his response? "I was about to accept," Kyle said, finding his voice. "If the offer includes working closely with R&D, how could I refuse?" The look that passed between them held the memory of shared nights and whispered discoveries, the way her cool skin warmed under his touch, how she had marveled at human passion while teaching him Etherean patience. They had found a rhythm together that transcended their physiological differences, creating something neither had experienced before. Thalen observed their exchange with knowing amusement. "Excellent. There is one more matter to discuss." He rose and walked to his desk, retrieving a small metallic object. "The board has approved the first test flight of the new propulsion system. As its savior, I thought you might want to be there, Kale." "I wouldn't miss it," Cal replied earnestly. "Good, because you'll be piloting it." Kale's eyes widened. "Sir?" "With Layla as your co-pilot," Thalen added, "the two of you working together has proven effective. I see no reason to change that dynamic." Later, as they walked together through the executive level toward the landing bay, Layla slipped her hand into Kale's, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Did you know about this?" he asked. "About the promotion?" "Yes, the test flight. That was my suggestion." Her silver eyes sparkled with mischief. "I thought you might enjoy the symmetry, from fixing my father's flyer to piloting our most advanced spacecraft." "Full circle," Kyle agreed, squeezing her hand, "though I'd never imagined where stopping to help a stranded alien would lead." "Are you disappointed?" she asked, a rare vulnerability in her voice. Kel stopped walking and turned to face her, unconcerned about who might see them. "How could I be? I missed my interview but found something far better. A better job, she teased, stepping closer. A better everything, he replied softly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face, though I'm still adjusting to dating the boss's daughter. There are some cultural differences we haven't fully explored. Such as? Her breath caught as his fingers traced the delicate white lines along her neck. A gesture he discovered drove her to distraction. Such as how Etherians handle public displays of affection, he murmured, leaning in until their lips were nearly touching. Traditionally, we're quite reserved, she whispered, her hand sliding up his chest. But I'm developing an appreciation for human customs. Their kiss was brief but charged with promise, a hint of the passion they'd discovered in private moments stolen between recovery, efforts, and debriefings. When they separated, several passing Etherian executives were staring with undisguised curiosity. Layla laughed, a sound Kel had come to treasure for its rarity. That should give them something to discuss at the next board meeting. Are you concerned? Kyle asked as they continued toward the landing bay. About us, I mean. I know interspecies relationships aren't common, especially for someone of your position. My father approves, she said simply, and I've never much cared for convention. Besides, after what we've been through together, ordinary concerns seem insignificant. The landing bay doors opened to reveal the test vehicle, sleek, elegant, and humming with potential. Its design incorporated elements of both Etherian precision and human innovation, a physical manifestation of what Cal and Layla had discovered together. Beautiful, isn't she? Layla said, her eyes reflecting the craft's gleaming surface. Absolutely, Kyle replied, though he wasn't looking at the ship. As they prepared for the test flight that would cement both their professional partnership and personal relationship, Kel reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. A missed interview, a chance encounter, a moment of kindness, all leading to this unexpected future with a woman from another world. Sometimes, he thought as Layla's hand found his again, the best opportunities in life come from the detours we never planned to take.